I'm going to say on today's show, we're going to talk about Peloton buying wearables, Intel investing $20 billion in factories in Arizona, and robots buying poetry.
We buy the poetry of the robots.
Yeah, the taxpayer paid for it.
To put those honest, hardworking poets out of a job.
Joining me as always from the East Sussex, a farmhouse, a barn. Where is he? Sebastian Mubbs, the deputy editor of DCD. How was the move? How was the whole settling in?
Well, I didn't have internet for the first week, so that was fun. Filing news stories on my knees, crawled next to a closed pub, trying to use the pub Wi-Fi.
Well, have you discovered a local coffee shop where you can escape your family for half a day?
We're on lockdown. There's no local nothing.
There's no escape.
There's no escape.
And as always, from the civilized world of Londonium, Maximal X.
The axis of evil. Yes, I'm broadcasting from a loft in Wood Green, and the weather is fine and inspires me to go for a cycle.
Max has an electric bike that takes him outside, but he doesn't need to move his legs. But we're going to talk about Peloton, which keeps you inside, but you have to move your legs for it to work.
Peloton buys wearables in the name of Aiqudo, Atlas Wearables, and Otari. And Atlas Wearable, I think, is the closest we can get from an Apple Watch. Although if you go to their website, they are not selling any watch. You have to write an application form to apply for this experience. I don't know what that means. Maybe that changed that after they were acquired by Peloton. Their watch looks just like Apple Watches with the Nike, the Mango, and the black. Peloton obviously known for their cycles, for their spin, for their wheels, for their at-home workout sessions, for their very expensive bikes, for their $49 plus the subscription that you go every month. And now they're going beyond from cycling company for at home workout company to potentially AI and wearable company and hardware.
Absolutely. We are interested in this because all three of the recent acquisitions were AI companies. They followed a number of other acquisitions, and it shows Peloton is very, very serious about AI, but it's buying small, these are not major companies, these are kind of like 40 million there, 50 million there. But it's interesting because Peloton, well, this is my personal opinions, is essentially a brand searching for a product. It's a little bit like Red Bull. At the moment, everything they do, other people can do. I'm not saying better, but it's just a question of time. Anybody, any fitness equipment manufacturer can and does already strap a tablet to their device. There's going to be a lot more of this, but for Peloton, essentially there are two ways forward. One is to build actual technology that people cannot replicate. And second, continue advertising like crazy, which is I think something that we're observing at the moment.
I just want to push back slightly on the Red Bull because they already have a very successful product, which is their bikes, right? Because I think that it does put them in an advantage. Because if I go to people's house, if I swipe those real estate, properties photos, the only bikes you'll find in people's house is the Peloton bike.
But they have a brand, not a product.
No. They have both right now. They built a brand on a decent product that's super expensive, and by being super expensive, that creates more of a brand because it becomes this exclusive thing. But the problem is that product is no longer special. There was a whole bunch of knockoffs that were kind of crappy. They've gotten better. They also had their live video service and their kind of trainer service. Again, that's being copied. So it's now about taking that existing audience that is growing at the moment thanks to the kind of stay-at-home culture and adding an as-a-service layer on top and get some stickiness, gamification, leaderboards, all of that kind of jazz, and tons of useless data that people can look at and go, oh, my heart rate spiked at this. It doesn't matter, but if it makes you happy, fine. Pay your $50 a month. The problem is simultaneously, Apple long ago reached that plateau. Apple reached the plateau of everyone that's going to buy an iPhone, we've got. Everyone that's going to buy any kind of Apple product, we've got them. How do we make more money? Sell them services. And so they, Apple TV, Apple Music, all these services that Apple are doing are not inventive. They're always seen as this very inventive company. When it comes to services, they're incredibly dull conservative and copycat. So of course they now have Apple Fitness Plus, which is just Peloton. That's all it is.
Peloton without the bike, $10.
Peloton service, $10. Because Peloton also have a bikeless, treadmill-less service that's $12, and it's we'll tell you to lift weights or whatever. But Apple can always undercut you because they have more cash reserves than most countries.
Right. They don't technically need the money. They can just kill the competition with, yeah.
Yeah, and then just like you saw with Apple Music and you see with Apple TV, they use the fact that they have this huge device audience where they control that device. So they just push. And they said they wouldn't do push notifications, but they do. And they even put ads within the settings of iOS. And it would be, it could see you going for a run, and it could say, hey, you're going for a run. How would you like to track that and gamify that? And, take that to the next level with Apple Fitness Plus. We'll give it to you for free for a year. Then you're used to gaining those stats on that leaderboard. All your friends maybe on that leaderboard. So it's this race to capture that audience and get them hooked on that data right now. And that's why Peloton needs to acquire to quickly move. Right. They need to acquire AI companies. They need to acquire wearable companies because it takes years to build that up.
Virtual assistants, though, very easy, dime a dozen. You don't have to be a very smart or have a lot of resources to build virtual assistants. So I think that's going to be the natural next step. Is giving voice to those stats, is building some kind of analytics system that can break down the numbers and tell you something interesting. Well, this is what analytics does.
Right. So Aiqudo, the AI company that they bought. That's what they pitched themselves as, kind of Alexa-like, Siri-like digital voice assistant, with the pitch at the time prior to acquisition being it's more designed for working with third-party apps. So it would be like open Uber, and then Uber would work with it, rather than the slightly more walled garden approach of the bigger guys. So presumably, again, if you're working out, your hands might be busy. You don't want to be kind of flicking around on your phone or on the touch screen. A voice assistant makes sense.
There are things that Apple does really well, mostly from the watch, and there are things Peloton does really well, mostly from the instructor and the bike. And I feel like Peloton just probably see all the competition piling up. I guess the Rebel analogy kind of makes sense because there's a lot of competition. Anybody can, what they're doing is not particularly, you're right, what they're doing is not particularly special other than the brand and a decent product. So they probably just want to, I don't know if this will be successful or not, but I think it makes all the sense in the world for them to say, yeah, Apple is eating our lunch with the Apple service. For people who don't even need to buy a bike, why would I choose? If I want to go $10 for workout, it's better than $1,500 and $50 a month, right? So they probably are thinking, we just need a decent wearable device that can go with our bike. So when they get the whole package, they can have a seamless workout experience. That I think that all they're going for is that perfect workout, an hour or 30 minutes of workout experience that can rival the Apple Watch, the Apple Fitness example. If they can do that, they've made it.
I think the idea of trying to do hardware, though, so a similar situation with Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook was petrified that he doesn't control the final layer. He doesn't control the Android. He doesn't control the Apple device. And that's always really scared him. So his idea was to team up with HTC for those Facebook phones. And
they work out pretty well.
Of the
for everybody
overburdened and terrifying landfills that we have, I'm sure if you dig down deep enough in any one of them, you're going to come across a lot of those Facebook phones.
What I like about Peloton is it's clearly going to be a case study for something, but we don't know what yet. It has reached critical mass. Everybody's aware of it, but like a couple of years down the line, 3-4 years down the line, we're going to be either talking about how Peloton built an empire, starting with those treadmills and an awful advertising, or we're going to talk about the fall of Peloton like we talk about the fall of HTC, like, it's just like, those arcs are definitely present in the industry. You can be the hottest shit on the planet, but that does not protect you from a fall.
I mean, they're closer to Juicero than HTC, but
yeah,
if it gets people moving, hey.
And there's something about the fitness space as well, like people are prepared to pay over the odds for something they see as premium. Again, Under Armour has built like a very successful business on this idea that of premium products at a very high price. So there's space for that.
I mean, one of the big unanswered questions with the wearables push we've had for the past like half decade, and now with these Peloton devices, is how useful is the data they capture? And they capture more and more data, heart rate, where you move to, and maybe your breathing, maybe any of these kind of things. So far, there hasn't been that much use to it beyond gamification. So it's nice for the person to see, but like most of the calorie counters are just made up. It completely depends on your own metabolism. Most of the heart rate monitors are completely way off. Most of the blood pressure things are way off. If there is an actual value in collecting all this data, then Peloton is potentially sitting on a large gold mine because they're going to get more and more data. But that is a completely open question.
Right. Well, I'm also curious too, where does AI fit in all this? Because they're buying these companies, and I don't know what they're currently doing, what you're saying too, with data and algorithm. What is their end game?
Workout as a service. And you need as many shiny little dongles on that, and as much ways of working out when after a workout are they most likely to be prompted to, hey, you did really well. If you pay $5 more this month, you can get a hands-on training from a top trainer or whatever. Like it's the same system that Netflix uses to try and work out when to push a movie to you.
But also, I think if you work out seriously, it's all about progress, right? It's how many reps can you do, how many sit-ups can you do, how many times can you do something, and there you always need to monitor progress. So it kind of makes sense in fitness training in particular, this obsession with data and numbers, because at a very superficial level, you just need to know, like that like in the summer of last year, you did this many curls, and this year you can do twice that.
Should we roll the music for Chip Watch?
Chip Watch. Bam. All right. You're all pumped. Your blood is pumping like you've been on a Peloton. You're excited. You want to hear about Intel. Yeah, your heart rate is spiking.
Developers!
Intel investing $20 billion in factories in Arizona.
The Arizona stories, they say they're going to spend $20 billion to build 2 fabs in Arizona, which is about in line with the cost of fabs because they're super expensive. It will cost more than $20 billion over their lifetimes. They're looking at, maybe half, like $50 billion over the course of their lifetime. The more interesting story is, they said, yes, we are going to use other fabs for our core products. So they'll use TSMC, they'll use Samsung to build their core chips. Simultaneously, they are getting into the foundry business. And this is completely against decades of Intel orthodoxy. They are going to be a company where you can go and say, build me some chips, and they will build them some chips.
All of that about Intel sounds really, really good. And I think they're very ambitious, and this feel like this is their another effort for them to come out of the never-ending slope they were on. But
the but is they're simultaneously saying, hey, we messed up. We were not able to make the chips we needed in the time frame we need. So we're going to use other manufacturers. Hey, come to us. We'll manufacture chips for you. And that is a little bit of a disconnect. But it is also them accepting their place in the world and accepting that certain things are going to be made better elsewhere, certain things they're good at making. It's also a concept that, foundries don't usually run at 100% capacity. Most foundries are at the moment because we're going through this chip crisis, but by the time these fabs come online, that probably won't be the case. So if Intel is giving up, say, 80% of its chip manufacturing to itself and it has 20% time spare, that's just wasted money. Why not build chips for someone else? And then I'll let you talk about it in a sec, but this is the most exciting part, is that they will also, and we don't know the exact details, but they will be licensing out the x86 architecture, currently only owned by them and AMD. So just a couple of days before this announcement, Google hired an ex-Intel employee and said, look, we're going to be building systems on chip, like proper chips, not just AI-specific chips, not just video processing chips. We're going to be building what will essentially be our own Xeons, our own Ryzens, our own Epics. And at the time, I was like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to do ARM? Are they going to do RISC-V? But now they have the option. They have this guy at Intel who knows x86, who built x86 chips. They can go to Intel and say, manufacture us these Google Intel licensed chips. And that's a huge change for Intel.
Okay, because my question would be because they're essentially offering their competitors their manufacturing facilities. Intel's lineup is so broad and is involved in so many different things. They have CPUs, they have FPGAs, they're working on GPUs. Why would you go to Intel and say, guys, can you build me the next Intel killer?
Yeah,
would you trust them to build the next Intel killer?
Yeah, yes, because Pat Gelsinger has realized this is it's almost like the cloud concept where Google didn't want to get into the cloud race because you could build the next Google on Google Cloud, and they didn't want that. But they realized, oh wait, but they could just do it on Amazon. Equally, if they're not going to use Intel foundries, they're going to use TSMC, they're going to use Samsung foundries. Samsung is a perfect example of Samsung's involved in a lot of products. Samsung makes chips for themselves. Samsung makes chips for their competitors, and it's worked fine. Intel was better off getting a piece of the pie of their competition than seeing their competition fund their manufacturing competition simultaneously. It's an acceptance that they can't have this walled garden forever because they've lost so much ground.
Do you think we could end up in the situation where AMD actually manufactures something on Intel fabs?
I mean, it's plausible. Intel knows x86 architecture and how to manufacture it. AMD obviously is the only other guys with the license. AMD does not have any semiconductor manufacturing other than test bed ones. They've mainly used TSMC. But if we get in another situation like we're in now, where there's a semiconductor crisis, and then Intel says, hey, we have capacity, AMD would be dumb not to take it, and Intel would be dumb not to offer it because it's going to be taken by someone else eventually anyway.
This is very interesting, and it's a very quick change because Pat Gelsinger has been there for what, like 3-4 months in the office.
So this is the question, right? Like Pat Gelsinger is getting a lot of the
credit,
but Satya Nadella, for example, he got a lot of the credit for turning Microsoft around. In particular, Microsoft Azure, but Microsoft Azure was launched under Steve Ballmer, just was the early days, and then Satya Nadella came in and got all the credit for it. Some of this shift was happening under Bob Swan, the previous and kind of rubbish Intel CEO, especially the shift to using other chip manufacturers, but that was mainly because he oversaw years of Intel failing to meet targets.
Yeah, and the way they announced that, like that actually put a dent in the share price, I think.
So, I mean, this is the beauty of narrative, is the previous way Intel was using TSMC was seen as a negative because it was leaked, it was conflicting messages, it was clearly this is a company on the back foot trying to hide how bad it is. Whereas the announcement now seems like a message of strength. Hey, we are evolving for the modern period. We're using other foundries when it makes sense. We're using our own when it makes sense. We just care about getting the best chips out. And it's the same thing. They're doing the same thing. Just it sounds so much better. It gives a lot more investor confidence. It makes more sense, and they can spin it into a positive.
Yeah. And now people like Samsung are feeling the pressure. Yeah, they actually took a bit of a beating on their share price. Them and Micron, I believe. So yeah, like it's just like chips are an ecosystem, and it doesn't matter what kind of chips you're manufacturing.
Yeah, because I mean, we talked about that previously with the semiconductor shortage. Chips are things you need to think about in the terms of decades. The main reason we're going through a chip shortage now isn't a supply issue. It's that the supply was guessed a couple of years ago, and no one guessed there'd be a giant pandemic that meant everyone upgraded their home laptops. So the impact of Intel getting into this foundry business, we're not going to see what that impact is until 2022, 2023, 2024, and on.
So the next episode on Chip Watch will be 2024. We'll see what happened to Intel. Do you like pancakes? You'll look like a stealth assassin from the clouds.
Are you coming on to me?
Will you marry me? That's my favorite. Just cut to the point.
You look like Jesus if he were a butler in a Russian mansion.
Wait, is that on there?
Yeah. Alright, if you're wondering what the hell we're talking about, these are just some of the many AI-generated chat uplines posted on the AI Weirdness Substack. It's one of the best kind of like Substacks about machine learning, and yeah, they have fun and it's very accessible. It's sort of like a battle between different AI-based language generation systems, and yeah, they're trying their best at generating chat uplines and with varying results. And some of them are very, very good. Like the Russian Jesus Butler thing originated from Da Vinci. And some of them are not very good. So, for example, so Babbage would approach a potential, like significant other by asking them, "Will you marry me?" Whereas Ada would just scream in all caps, "Cape fashion!
I love you. I love you. I love you. To the confines of death and disease, the legions of earth rejoices. Woe be to the world."
That's W.H. Auden-esque. Yeah, and I think this one is actually the most practical of it all, and I actually want to know the answer. And it goes like this. Out of curiosity, did you know that you can sip and snore pumpkin spice latte? So for all of you basics out there, can you tell me the answer? Can you, after you take a photo of your name on the cup, can you sip and snore pumpkin spice lattes? Maybe that's a fall question, but we're still in spring. But I guess we'll get the answer in September. But that's a great question.
Dude, we're not in America. We don't have that like period where we just put pumpkin in everything, right? That's a very American thing where it's just like, oh, today's the day where like my toilet paper is pumpkin flavored.
Well, listen, but you have like a saltwater taffy latte. You have saltwater taffy latte.
Yeah, as it should be.
That's not better.
Life is meant to be suffered.
Okay. Another good one is DaVinci, right? Because they mostly trained them on kind of actual pickup artist lines. So DaVinci has picked up negging. One of the chat-out lines here is like, "Wait, this beanie hat, is it fashionable?"
That's totally fair. That sounds like something I would say. Well,
no, this seems more like you. I will briefly summarize the plot of Back to the Future 2 for you. So this is built on GPT-3, OpenAI's kind of generally seen as like
perfect machine language, the language tool.
Yeah, I mean GPT-3 is generally seen as the most like exciting and fun and advanced natural language generation system out there at the moment. And the great thing is, they have a limited availability, but you can take it and you can then build things on top of it. I spoke to Latitude CEO. They have a dungeon game, and the game just kind of plays with you. Obviously, it's quite janky, but that's a really cool idea. We'll get into it a bit. Some people have used it for poetry as well as pickup lines. It's a really cool, completely impractical at the moment thing. And please don't try to pick up women using it.
or do and tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean Max.
I mean, it's not like the existing model is working.
Yeah, I think Max saying, "I have exactly 4 stickers. I need you to be the 5th," is probably better than some of the things I've heard him say to people, including, and this is true, on a yacht party where he turned to a lady and said, "Do you like arm chips?"
Yeah.
I think that's literally like an AI pickup line without question. Do you like arm chips? Surprisingly, that's why in our first meeting, that's what he said to me too.
Instant attraction. No. It was a tech party, and I just thought it was reasonable to assume that people that were present would know about arm chips. It turned out that the lady in question was interested in VR, and we had an interesting conversation about VR, and then we had a business meeting, which I thought was a date.
Right, except that that her number stopped working after that.
It's one of the most tragic things I've ever heard, and AI can't solve it just yet.
No. So basically, if I had to deploy these, I would adapt one of these, and then I would be like, haha, that was generated by AI, and that would be a conversation starter. And I don't think it actually works better, but it's a strategy.
Taking this to like a whole deeper level or more shallower level, I wonder if. We're talking about Peloton with all the data, right? I wonder if this is going to be like, there will be something that compile all the things that work and not work and all that kind of stuff. And it would just be some kind of an AI coach and say, hey, Max, last night you were at the bar, that didn't work out. Try this line.
Yeah, probably, but it's going to be terrifying. Just like, Max talked about negging. There's this whole internet subculture of trying to break women down so you can then prey on them. And it's a deeply destructive and terrifying thing, like most of YouTube. And
do not put it in the algorithm. Yes.
Yeah, but the algorithm is always built on the most terrifying, messed up parts of the internet. But so what might have a better chance at wooing a more sensitive soul, of course, is poetry. Right, it's a bit better than chat lines are very passé in this modern era of the educated human, not as successful. So poetry, and again, AI has your back, Max.
It's a World Expo. Every country brings something to the World Expo to impress the world, right? It's a well-established tradition. So what the
UK, which builds nothing and creates nothing, and was a services country, but now can't do that because of Brexit. What does it bring to the table, Max?
It brings something very emblematic of the state the country finds itself in. It brings an art installation which will consist of AI-generated poetry, except the project itself is not a science project or a research project. It was created by a brand
experience, AG avant-garde.
And it is avant-garde.
just to put out our own publication for a second, on the March 23rd edition of the article by Lewis Stone, it says, the title goes, I want to offer a correction because the title says UK to Wow World Expo with AI-based interactive poetry installation. I will say UK to the World Expo with AI-based interactive poetry installation.
So essentially what they did is they took poems from 100 British poets, like half a million lines of text in total. They fed it to an algorithm, and then the output they produced was graded by actual poets, like, for example, members of the British Poetry Society and people like them. So they did it over 5 months of grueling work, grading predictions and creations from an algorithm, and basically the end result looks like something you can see on the website. And Tian, would you mind doing the honors and reading the AI generated poem?
Again, this is not only after the 5 months, this is the one that they chose to make public. So this is the best of the best poem, because they've only currently, so the idea is when the expo happens, expo attendees will all put in like a seed word, and then together it will make like a big poem out of all these words that are meant to express humanity. But as a precursor, they've released this one poem. So presumably there are tons of other poems that weren't good enough. This is the creme de la creme, the best poetry that the British AI...
The best of the GBE. And soon I am staring out again, begin to practice my words, expecting my word will come. It makes no sense. It will not. The wind is calling. My friend is near. I hear his breath. His breath is not the air. He touches me again with his hands and tells me I am growing old. He says, far old, we travel across the empty field in my heart. There is nothing in the dark, I think, but he.
It's a love poem.
It's beautiful. Now the touching part got me a little ticklish.
The next one, I kind of enjoy this more because it gives the user more agency, right?
Right, you throw in the first line, right?
Yeah, you throw in the first line, you choose 3 poets from a very short list that you'd like. This is Google's verse by verse, and you write the first line, and then it will suggest each of those 3 dead virtual poets will give you 3 lines. So you have 9 lines to choose from. You choose a line, then there's another line, and you slowly build the poem, and you can refresh if there are none. So here's one. I like to read AI business. Indeed it is. It has my nation. Freedom, sweet, the wonder of the debt. One must go to make this parapet. Perhaps it has some forgotten youth, or I was born with the law of truth. And it kind of makes sense, but again, this is where, the writer had to choose those lines, and there were a lot that didn't make anywhere near as much sense.
This is fun, but ultimately, I'm very aware that I'm reading something that's essentially meaningless.
Well, I mean, it's also from a government perspective. I mean, the UK deeply failed its arts community prior to this pandemic, and especially during this pandemic, was very criticized for how it treated them and how it supported them. But is very patriotic and likes to kind of cash in on the rich history of British arts. So this allows them to have their cake and eat it, where they wave a small flag, a little grapevine olive branch towards the artists and the poets, and say, look, hey, we're supporting arts, we're promoting poetry, but actually spend almost no money other than money that goes to a brand agency. Right.
So what the UK has got going so far is World War II movie that features Churchill's speech that showed them UK single-handedly defeated the Nazis. Guarantee winner. Yeah, the UK have no help from anybody and just defeated Nazi themselves, and they stood tall and they will fight. We shall fight them in the water. We shall fight them on the Channel Islands. We shall
fight them at the pub.
It's a requirement for everybody to do it, Churchill.
The thing is,
we will never give up. Okay, and
we will fight them on the podcast.
Yeah, and that, so UK has got that going, and also AI poet.
The last thing I would want to say is people really should stop positioning AI as an artist. This is the AI,
Yeah,
AI written,
100%.
AI generated poetry, AI written paintings. This is not what the technology is all about. The reflecting of human experience is good in fractions. So basically, it's good
Right.
when it helps you paint, when it helps you create, when
Right.
you when it gives it some kind of prods. You need to use it as a tool in specific instances, but it's still as part of a wider tapestry created by a human being. I think there are countless applications of AI in music and in writing, but not like this.
100%. Where can people find you, Sebastian Moss?
On Twitter, @SebMoss. You can find me somewhere in East Sussex with a new zoom lens and some Megalodon shark teeth. Max, where can they find you?
They can find me on aibusiness.com. And actually, I forgot to make. We have a small announcement. There's gonna be new members of the AI Business family. We are growing as a collective. You cannot stop us, and you shouldn't. What I'm trying to say is we have hired not one but two new reporters. That is right. We will have more news, more content. We will have some fresh blood, some new energy. These guys are massive nerds. They love AI. Like some of them, one of them has expertise in IP, and the other one has expertise in law specifically, so we're gonna be a lot more serious, but also there will continue to be some shit posting, so look out for the bigger, fatter, juicier AI business in the weeks and months to come.
Listen, there's only one place to find me now. You can find me on LinkedIn and occasionally putting up podcast videos and sometimes put on high quality interview videos. It's TIEN.
Lovely video on 5G that must have taken you many years.
About a couple months, yeah. 2 months.
It's crazy for a single video. Obscene
Yeah.
amount of corporate excess.
I just say if you're curious about anything, write me. By the way, I never finished my whole domain is TIENCHIFU.
Yeah, for you indeed. But like, I've also heard that you have an Instagram account. Is that true? Because you
I don't mention
barely
it.
mentioned it.
You know that, and you know what? I'm not gonna mention it.